All right, I'm all set now.
All right, let's get started. Can you hear me?
Yes.
All right. So I'm Robin Knight, and today I'm introducing our guest speaker, Dr. Megan Walters. On the UNCG site, it says Dr. Walters serves as Associate Director for Career Development and the Liaison for the College of Visual and Performing Arts. In this role, she provides leadership for campus-wide career readiness programs. Megan also serves various work groups focused on initiatives to enhance the student experience at UNCG. And today we have her here to speak with us about resumes. And yeah, whenever you're ready, my power's about to go out. Oh my God. Whenever you're ready, Dr. Walters.
Oh no, I'm so sorry. Robin, that's a bummer. Hey everyone, like Robin said, my name is Megan Walters, and I'm excited to spend some time with you today. Your organization is one of my favorites on campus. From the time I started working at UNCG in 2017, I was always so pleasantly surprised to see such an active academic organization on the graduate school side. So you're always impressive. We've had a lot of events that you all have taken part in over the years, and everyone always just has the best things to say about you. So I've had the pleasure to do this presentation with you all in the past, and it's always a great time. I really appreciate your questions, and I'll look forward to your getting involved in this conversation today too. So my number one hope is that at the end of the session, when I leave, that what you remember is that you learned something you didn't know before. If there is a question that you have as we are going through this, I invite you to interrupt me. I'm a laid-back presenter, and my whole purpose is to get you the information that you need and want. So don't hesitate to derail me. Don't hesitate to challenge something that I say. Let's get to the root of a good answer, right? That's what we want to do. So I really just appreciate your time and your invitation to spend the afternoon with you. So I would love to know just a little bit of context about who's in the space. So if you are near a keyboard and you're able to do this, you can chat in the box. You can type in the chat box what specialty you have or you're interested in. So if you are looking for opportunities today, what kinds of opportunities are you looking for? So you can just type those into the chat. All right, that's perfect. So helpful for me to know what exactly you might be hunting for. So we'll just go ahead and dive in, and I'll make sure to make some comments that might feel closely related to those specialty areas that you have. And if you have a question, or if any of you have heard context that maybe is adjusted slightly for the particular specialty that you have, let's give some space and time to that too. I like to start with just some common groundwork about what a resume or a CV is. You're likely hearing both resume and CV, and sometimes you're seeing those words interchangeably or those ideas interchangeably. And for the most part, I think when people are using those words, they don't really know why they're using one or the other. So for a lot of reasons, it's a semantics issue, but we'll talk about the difference of both of these. So these three ideas are really the purpose of a CV or a resume. It serves as a marketing tool, absolutely, right? It's you marketing yourself to an employer. It's meant to help you land an interview, right? It is not meant to help you get a job only. This is just the first step in the process. You can land an interview, but nobody looks at a resume or a CV and says, yep, that's our person. We don't need to talk to them anymore. So it's just that first step. And then it's your personal brand, right? There are a lot of different things that an employer can pick up on from your resume or CV, other than just what experience you have to share. So I'm wondering if any of you have ideas about what those things are. What else does your resume or CV imply to an employer besides what your history looks like? What kinds of jobs, internships, experiences you've had? What else can they gather from that document? Interest, skills, sometimes attitude, how you are with grammar. Absolutely, yes, Melinda. Yeah, there are a lot of those things that we forget that we're making an impression about. Grammar, attention to detail, structure, adaptability. So what kinds of, are you suited to do a lot of different kinds of things, or does your story seem, singular in focus, right? There are so many different things that this document can say. And because that's true and it carries a lot of weight, it's important to put a lot of time and energy into it. So we'll talk about structure of a resume, so some format concerns. We'll talk about content of these documents. And so hopefully by the end of this, you feel like you have some context to either strengthen your existing document or start over if you feel like you're in that place. So just to think a little bit more about this difference between CVs and resumes, there are a couple of industries and a couple of work environments where a CV really is the required document and that it's different from a resume. Academia is maybe one of the most common of those places, right? So if you are looking to enter higher education, if you want to join the faculty, if you are looking to become a member of the library team at a university, then a CV really is your document. And compared to a resume, a CV is typically longer. It's as long as it needs to be, right? It's much different. Whereas a resume is more structured, it's more tailored and specific, so it's shorter. The content of a CV focuses on your education, your academic background, and the experiences that you've had, but it allows you to be more comprehensive. So as in a resume, you might only list some of your like the jobs that you've had, the experiences that you've had doing those jobs. On a CV, you have much more space and time to spend on academic projects, on courses that you've taken, research that you've done, presentations. So you get to focus a lot more, in your case, in this graduate program work that you've been doing. And then, the purpose of these two documents, if you think of them differently, both of them really are about gaining employment or interviews. But the purpose of a CV is to provide a more comprehensive view of who you are as a candidate. So if you still have questions about, well, am I writing a CV or am I doing a resume? If you are having those questions and you're not entering academia, you're not looking to join faculty at a higher education institution, what you want to focus on then is not the semantics of whether you're writing a resume or a CV. Instead, you want to focus on relevant and recent information. Start work first with the content, and then someone like a faculty member or a mentor to you, or a person like me who works in a career center can talk to you about the specific positions you're applying for and which of these documents is best fit for that. Any questions about this? So what I've put on this screen is a typical resume. Okay. You'll see the ingredients that are included here are certainly your contact information, right? That's the stuff that we feel like, oh, we can do that in the in our sleep. We can talk contact information. The next section is education background. And so I see the question about like if you're going to include your coursework, how do I decide which courses I include? So the example I like to share is that if you are including coursework on your document and you're a biology major, you don't need to, nor should you list intro to biology, right? Because that's a given. Every bio program in the country, in the world, is going to include information from an intro to bio course. The courses you want to list are those that are higher level, really specific, or unique to the UNCG program, right? So you want to talk about those things that aren't obvious to the people who are in your industry. You might also include courses that you've taken on an elective basis, because those courses are more likely to be courses that you've taken that other candidates haven't. So you probably won't list every course from your graduate program, but you want to be picky so that you're sharing the highest level of information that you can, the things that help you stand out from other candidates. Hopefully that's a helpful answer. You can see on the example on the screen that Anita Job shared one course that she took during her study abroad experience. That formatting where you see relevant coursework is appropriate. It makes a lot of sense to have like a subsection within education dedicated to relevant coursework. You don't have to say a whole lot about what the courses are unless they're really not self-explanatory. But if there are things about a particular course that you wanted to highlight, maybe it's a research project, maybe as you know, you took a practicum course, for example, instead of listing that as a course, you would list that as an experience. You can also get away with including more courses if you list just the title of the courses and you do it in a column way, because it takes up less length on your document, and your resume and CV content, your space is valuable real estate, right? So you want to be sharing those things that are most impactful. So you want to be smart about your formatting of that stuff. So contact information, then you'll lead with education. Then you talk about your experiences and your skills and abilities. Those last two bullets on this page, experiences and skills and abilities, you have a lot of control. You get to make decisions about prioritizing the information, about the specific names you assign to your section titles. And so Anita's resume shows skills before it shows relevant experience. And there may be a very valid reason to do one over the other. And most of the time, you're making that decision based on the application. What position are you applying for? I see a question about GPA. So under Anita's education section, she has included a GPA. It is not required that you indicate that on your resume or CV. If it is something that you are particularly proud of, certainly include it. The thing that's difficult about a GPA is that all of us feel really, we have a lot of different feelings about a GPA and what a good GPA is, right? So there may be some among us who are like, I got a 3.0 and that was my goal and I am stoked about it and that's what I'm going to include. And then there are probably others among us today who say, I would never include my GPA if it wasn't above a 3.75. Because we feel differently about it and because employers feel differently about it, it's tough to know what the right thing to do is. You have to follow your gut. But if you are required to submit a transcript, an official transcript, or if the position you're applying for requires a certain GPA, they're going to get that information from another source anyway, right? You'll have to submit that transcript. And so if you think you're including it because it's required, you probably can include it somewhere else. All right, so these are the typical ingredients. Who are you? What's your education background? And what have you done? There are some things that you will probably include that are under that experience section that maybe don't come to mind immediately. Society has been telling the workforce forever that the things you include on a resume are things you got paid to do, and that is absolutely not true anymore. Yes, you want to list those things you got paid to do, but you all know very well that there are things you're doing that you're not getting paid to do that may be the most relevant experience you have right now, or it may be the experience where you have gained the most skills. So if you're in a leadership position for LISA, for example, you're not getting paid to do that, but think about the skills that you're gaining from having that opportunity. So it's not just about work experience. So some basic rules for the document, whether it is a CV or a resume: avoid templates at all costs. Templates typically make really bad use of the space available. The fonts are not always great. Sometimes they have weird images, or they encourage you to submit a photo, and that's not something you want to do. And templates usually have standardized categories and very strict formatting, and it's not great. An employer, a resume reviewer, an HR team, they can spot them from a mile away, and you don't have a lot of control over it. So I would always start with a blank document. Avoid personal pronouns and other filler words that don't add value. You do not have to you don't have to use full sentence structure in a resume. Just quick phrases without punctuation can do the trick. So you don't have to include words like "the" all the time. And you don't need to reference yourself, because we know it's about you. This is your document. You want to always provide concrete details. The more specifics, the better. So some specific information that you might include in your resume and CV. I'll give you a couple of examples, and then I'll ask you to add some more into the chat. But some concrete details might be, if you have experience working in the Jackson Library, what details do you have about the square footage of the building, the number of resources in the stacks, how many guests you have on a daily or weekly or annual basis, right? Those are some context details that can help an employer understand the setting without ever having stepped foot in the Jackson Library before. So what are some other concrete details or specific information pieces that you might include on a resume that have to do with your work in information? So the examples that I offered were square footage of the building, number of resources or books in the stacks, annual or weekly guest counts, the number of people that you're interacting with. What other concrete details might be helpful? Demographics served, absolutely. Technology, so specific technology programs, absolutely. Are there, is there a program or platform that is used maybe at the reference desk, or is there a system that is specific to keeping track of inventory, things like that? Absolutely. Okay, great examples. So those will continue to come to you, and they're probably already written all over your documents, but you just haven't been thinking about them in this way yet. You always want to prioritize. So I've said that word a couple of times, and I will continue to say it. It is the most important thing that you can keep in mind when you're writing these documents. Prioritize the information, and always use bullets. Prioritize bullets over paragraphs or other walls of text. And so I am an elder millennial. I think that's what the comedians call it. So I graduated from undergrad in 2004. Facebook wasn't a thing yet. So just to provide some context about my familiarity with social media. Okay, so bullets versus paragraphs. I'm much more likely to have energy to engage with tweets. I will read everybody's tweet all the way through, right? It's short, it's succinct, it holds a lot of information, but it doesn't take a lot of energy to read. But I do not have energy to read everyone's Facebook status update. It takes longer. There's usually information there that doesn't belong. It's not helpful to me. And so if you can think about the way you're presenting information on your resume and what kind of energy an employer or a resume reviewer or a review committee might have for that information, always prioritize more concise language. Bullets over paragraphs all day, every day. Okay. Any questions about some of these basics? So there are two major layout styles that you may use. One is a traditional layout. This is the most common resume layout, and it invites you to talk about your experience in reverse chronological order. So a traditional resume is most common for folks who have a series of experiences that are somewhat relevant to what you're doing. So probably all of you will fall under this category. There are also opportunities to use a functional resume, and a functional resume allows you to talk about your skill sets that are incredibly transferable if you don't have a lot of experience that is specifically focused on what you're going into. So we see functional resumes working a lot of times with folks who are re-careering, if you will, right? So you've been in industry for some time, you've come back to do this program, the MLIS, and you want to enter a new field. This functional resume might be better for you, right? Because it allows you to focus on those major skill areas that are going to be great for you as a candidate for these roles. But it doesn't focus on maybe some of the experiences that you've had that feel unrelated, right? So I see some comments here that a lot of you are feeling this way. Does anybody want to offer just a quick note of like what experiences you had in the past? So if you're re-careering, what kind of work were you doing before you joined the library world?
Hi, I will. I've worked in publishing for 25 years. So this is probably my third career. So I'm looking forward. This is definitely me for the layout.
Awesome.
Yep. I did have a question. What do you feel for this type of layout? Where would you put education? This has come up in a recent class I had where I have my education right here at the bottom, the way this does. And nearly all the comments from the class were put it at the top. So I'm not sure if, do libraries like that?
Yeah, this is a really great question. So the reason that I see education at the bottom of this example, this is probably someone applying for a position that doesn't require this specific certification, the degree program. Because you are coming from a career where one set of education experiences were important, and now you'll be entering a field where probably this master's degree is required. I would always lead with the education. It's a good question.
Great, thanks so much.
Absolutely. So I see some teaching in the comments, food service. So many people use a functional resume when they're trying to tell the story of how their past work in the service industry has prepared them for whatever work they're doing now. So absolutely, this functional resume or the traditional layout can work for most of you in this room. And we can work independently. We can work together to determine which one is really best for you. But these are the two major layout ideas. Any questions about just the difference between the two of these? is it bad to have a different layout, a different than one of these two? Is that what you mean, Karen? Or different from, yeah, different from one of these? Not necessarily. What's really important is that you are featuring experiences that are relevant and or recent, and that the story you're trying to tell is the story you're actually telling. And if you can think about your resume like any other document that anyone is reading, so even think about for your program now in MLIS, if you've ever been reading an article or a book chapter or any other source, you decide pretty early if it's interesting to you, right? And when you're looking through this article, maybe none of you in this space are doing this, right? But if you were skimming articles or book chapters rather than reading every word, think about what clues are in those documents that cause you to pay attention, right? So it might be a different format as long as there are still cues for the eyes. What are the section headings? What kinds of style choices have you chosen, like bolding or italics, so that you're helping your reader, because you want to remember that this is a document that's for them. It is not for you, right? It's all about somebody else reading it and getting interested in it. So it's not necessarily bad, but where I would say it's bad, I would say 95% of the time, that's because it's a template that's being used. Absolutely. Great question, Karen. All right. So I went over these essential ingredients really at the beginning. Contact information is important, your education, critical, and then your experience is really what people are focused in on. So I want to give you a couple of quick tips about each of these sections, and then we'll go through an exercise of telling your story so that you know how to write about the experiences that you've had so that an employer knows exactly what you're trying to say. So for your contact information, your name, really important, and always the largest thing on the document. So somewhere between 14 and 20 point font, depending on the font you're using, right? You don't want it to take up half a page, of course, but you do want it to be the thing that stands out. So keep that in mind. Your address is important, but it used to be true that you had to put your specific street address on a resume. And now, because so many of us are submitting applications virtually, we have a little bit of extra nerve about that, right? It feels weird to put your street address on a document that you don't know really who is going to be able to find it. So all that really is required is that you're indicating your city and state. You can get away with not including that, but I would do it. Include your city and state. And so that's just a little bit, it's providing some context, but not too much that it feels unsafe. Then you'll have your phone number and an email address. Think before you include these two pieces of information as well. Before you submit a document for review by a reviewer or an employer, call your phone number from some other source. What do you sound like? What is that first impression? Is that if that employer is going to hear your voice for the first time or interact with your voicemail for the first time? Make sure that you've recorded a greeting. Make sure your voicemail box is not full. Make sure that you are giving the impression vocally that you want to give to an employer. And then similarly with your email address, make sure it is a simple email address that focuses on your name. You don't want a lot of extra numbers or characters. You don't want it to be cute in any way. You just want it to be basic. So mine is meganleewalters@gmail.com. Focus on your name. And if you have a very common name and you cannot claim that email address, think about ways that you might change it up very simply. Maybe you have a dot, Megan.Lee.Walters, or underscores. Or if Megan Lee Walters was taken and I couldn't find any version of that, maybe I include the word career or career coach or something that has to do with my profession. So those are things you want to look for, but get feedback from the people around you about what your voicemail sounds like and what your email address is before you share those. So I've got a couple of good questions in here. Let's see, Robin Wright, you were saying home address, just can't do it. Absolutely. And then Chadwick, is there a bias if you include it and you're trying to apply for out-of-state jobs? Yes, there absolutely can be. So if you are applying for out-of-state jobs and you're not only applying for out-of-state jobs, but you're very intentionally trying to relocate, I would indicate that somewhere, most certainly in a cover letter. But if you include an objective or you have, like you might even choose to add an extra piece of information in your contact info. Currently in Greensboro, North Carolina, relocating to Houston, Texas. You want to make that indication because there is some bias for out of the area applications. It's expensive to recruit folks. It's expensive, you know, there might be an added expense to providing relocation funds for someone who's coming from out of town. But if you are committed to the relocation, or at least you're implying that, it can work to your advantage for sure. This is a great question that doesn't have a perfect answer, but it's important to know about that potential for bias. All right, so objective, profile, summary. If there were anything controversial in the career development world, it's an objective on a resume. There are folks who are very clearly in the yes, use an objective camp, and those who are very clearly in the no, never use an objective camp. If you're going to have an objective or a profile or a summary, make it count. If it is general and it doesn't say anything value added, you're wasting your space. You want to focus on any critical highlights. So you can read an example of what I might indicate in my objective if I used one, but I don't. So higher education administrator, I included some details about how long I've been in the career, what are the functional areas that I have experience with, that I have some experience with budget management. But really, all of this stuff that's in my objective is all over my resume. It's all over my CV already. So there's nothing here that is specifically important for me to list. Objectives, profiles, summaries, they can be incredibly important for folks who have a specific skill set that might get lost in the detail. Folks who speak a second, third, fourth, fifth language, folks who have particular skill in programs, in technology programs that are critically important for your role. And then Karen's commented here that there are, on governmentjobs.com, there's a space for an objective on application. So this is cool because, you know, there are other places where you can indicate this kind of information other than your resume or your CV. If you have a LinkedIn profile, this kind of information is really good in your summary. But a lot of the stuff that you want to say in an objective, you would be rewriting again in your cover letter. So just think about what is the most important information for you to lead with to capture the attention of an employer or recruiter. All right, so your education section, we talked a little bit before that GPA is optional. Your relevant coursework is also optional. You want to include those things if they're incredibly value added, right? You always want to include the full name of your institution, the location, full names of the degrees, which brings up that you only need to indicate the institutions from which you've graduated. So if you transferred as an undergraduate student from one campus to another, if you transferred after you received an associate's degree, include it. If you transferred after a year or a semester or any other period of time but you did not graduate from that location, you do not have to include it. And in most cases, there's no need to. There could be exceptions. It depends on like if there was something special about that previous institution that gives you a little bit of an advantage applying for something. If there's like a faculty member that you worked with that could help you get an opportunity, right? If it's an opportunity to name drop or something like that, then maybe. In your education section, indicate your thesis or dissertation title. You can include information about your advisor, and then your graduation date. You only need to list the month and the year that you graduated. You don't need to include the span of months or years. You're really focused on that completion date. Question about associate's degrees, absolutely, include them. Anything that you have completed, you can include. In your education section, you could also include any certifications that you had completed, but I've also seen those things included like in a section toward the end of a document, skills and certifications. So if it's important information, but you would not put it in that same importance category as a degree, again, this is one of those places where you have some control over where you include the information, but definitely associate's degrees. You can list those. All right, so this is the big stuff. This is what you all thought we were going to spend all the time on. You're like, oh my gosh, we spent time on stuff that I wasn't even thinking about. Your experience is what's important. This is what an employer or recruiter is spending a lot of time focused on. And there are 5 components you want to include about every experience you talk about. What was your title? What was the name of the company, the institution, or the organization? Where was it? The city and state. Excuse me. When was it? So what's the date range, the month and year to month and year? And the description of what you did. What were your tasks? What skills did you gain? What achievements did you reach? And so you see under that experiences title, we're including things here like work, leadership, research, presentations, publications, service. It's all of it, not just the work stuff, right? Just a moment. Sorry about that. Thanks. So we're going to talk about each of these. Really, we're going to spend time talking about the description. So how do you describe what you've done? But do you have any questions about titles, institution name or company name, location, date range before we move on to telling your story? Oh, Michelle, this is a good question. Some of your dates go back a long time. You're using years only, not months. Is this an issue? Not necessarily, but you want to make sure that when a person is looking at your document, that the consistency is there. So if half of your resume or CV shows date ranges and the second half of your CV includes only years, then maybe think about how else that's broken up. So maybe your most relevant work experience has those date ranges, but those previous experiences that you're just listing because you're trying to tell a full story of your history just have the years, then that's okay. But make sure that each of the sections that you have on your document are as consistent as they can be. Okay, so when you describe your experiences, you'll remember I said before that you want to use bullets, not paragraphs. You also want to start every bullet point with a strong verb, some sort of verb that has an implication of a skill set. Keep personal pronouns out of the game. No I, me, my, or we. Always use the correct tense. And the tense you want to choose really is anything in the past is past tense. Absolutely. And anything that is current, make a choice and be consistent. Either use present tense or you can use past tense. I would encourage you to use present tense, but what that will require you to do is to always remember to update this document, because you can get in this habit of using present tense in speech. And then anytime you update your resume, if you forget to update that to past tense, then it shows up as something that you forgot to check on, right? And that attention to detail is important. So even though I said be concise, use bullet points, you also need to elaborate on some of those skills, accomplishments, and responsibilities. You want to think more about those things than you do about the specific tasks, the work tasks that you did. And then think about the reader. How do you get them interested? What can you say about the experiences that you've had that are appropriate for the positions you're applying for? So there are two examples of what we will see on a resume or a CV. One is that folks use task-based language to describe what they did. So in this gray column, 3 different bullets might be responsible for several fundraising events, assisted with marketing for fundraising event, and served as a sales associate for fast-paced retail store. And in theory, that's fine, right? It's telling a little bit of information, but you really want your bullet points to focus on skills and accomplishments. So instead of responsible for several fundraising events, the stronger way to say that is organized and managed 3 annual campus and community fundraisers totaling $5,000 in donations. And so the formula that's following is start with an action verb, talk about what you did, so there's some task information there, but close it out with information about why you did it, how you did it, or what the result of your hard work was. So those experiences that were on the slide before break down like this. You're starting with action language, organized and managed, focusing what you did. We had 3 campus and community fundraisers. And the result was we raised over $5,000 in charity. So if you can remember this formula, then you can tell a strong story about everything you've done. So here are a couple of other examples. So your history doesn't change, the experience doesn't change, nothing about what you've done in the past has changed. What you may need to change is the way you're talking about it. We tend to focus on what we spent time doing. I spend a whole bunch of time writing emails, so much time, but that's not important. That's not the meat of it, right? What am I doing when I'm communicating with campus partners? What are the outcomes? How many students am I engaged with? What kind of impact am I making? What are the outcomes that I can focus on? And so those are the things that you want to spend your time and energy on a resume or a CV. So these are some of the section headings that you might want to include on your resume and or CV. So I want to give you just a moment to review this list. And if you see something on this list that you had not included in your document before, I want you to type it into the chat box, just to tell each other, oh my gosh, right, I didn't think about this, and now I need to include this piece of information. And then if there's anything that you've included that isn't here on this list, but you think is powerful, put that in the chat box too. Good question, Michelle. Presentations, are those used more for CVs? Probably yes, but if a presentation that you did was a component of some other experience, it would certainly be worth it to include it here. Where would honors and awards fit on the resume? Great question. So it could be its own section. And I have seen people include that either directly in the education section or immediately below it, or toward the end of the document closer to skills and certifications. This is a great entry. Yes, professional development. So programs that you've participated in, workshops that you've been a part of, right? So at UNCG, we have tons of workshops that are specific to the student experience, right? So maybe a safe zone or a trans zone workshop, or our student affairs department offers opportunities to focus on a culture of care. So how to take care of or how to work with students in crisis. But there are also like special workshop opportunities that are offered maybe through your grad program or through a professional association. Those could be really great to include. Academic accomplishments, absolutely, that's a really great thing to include. So some of you might belong to honors organizations connected to your academic discipline, or you were in a previous degree program. Maybe you earned an academic scholarship or an award. Maybe you presented research during a graduate student expo. There are lots of really great academic accomplishments that can work. That's a great example, Robin. So skills and proficiencies, I just want to spend a moment on this section because there are skills to include and skills definitely not to include in a section like this. This is a common section, but it is not required. And the only things you'd want to include in a section like this are computer or technical skills, so maybe programs that you're familiar with, but good at, right? Not just like, I know how to open a Word document. That's not enough. Any foreign language proficiencies, certifications can be included in this section. And then anything that is career specific. So do you all have any examples of career specific skills or proficiencies or certifications that might fit in this section? Anything career specific to you all? Michelle, that's a good example. Hootsuite. So anything that has to do with social media can be really helpful. So don't be afraid to include that. It is a skill set that is helpful for the workplace. Specific ILS programs, absolutely. It can also be helpful if you're entering an academic environment, your familiarity with Canvas, anything about the Google platform, right? Some places are Google campuses, some places are Outlook campuses. You now have like expert level understanding of Zoom. We're rolling out Teams. You might have some experience with Teams, WebEx, any of those programs. After the past year, right, we know how to use those things well. Yes, Zotero, any other kind of bibliography kind of programming, anything that students are using on a college campus that you've had the opportunity to learn or teach, definitely are value adds for your resume. LibGuides, yes, yeah. So like understanding that is a skill set all in its own, right? Not only understanding how they work, but your specific skill set is in information as a whole, collecting it, vetting it, compiling it. And so a LibGuide can be, that's a cool way to talk about that, right? It's something specific to what you all do. A really important rule is to avoid soft skills on this list at all costs. Communication, teamwork, collaboration, that stuff does not belong here. That stuff belongs in your experience descriptions. Communication skills, teamwork, collaboration, management, supervision, all of that stuff belongs in the experience. That's where you want to talk about it. Yeah, Robin. Okay, that's great. Public libraries definitely want to know what areas you can help other patrons in. Yeah. So even if it feels like just common knowledge to you, that can be a skill set that's really helpful to an organization. Perfect. Okay, so just to follow up, style, consistency is key. If you use caps, bold, italics, underlining, that's awesome. It can be really helpful for emphasis, but be consistent. If you always, if you indicate your position title in bold and you underline it, do that every single time you indicate a position title. Just be as consistent as you possibly can. Use the blank space on your document effectively, right? You do need some blank space to give the reader a break. So you'll see in Anita's document, there's space in between each of these sections. So it gives us just a tiny little bit of a break. Your margins should always be somewhere between 1/2 inch and 1 inch. The default on Microsoft Word, yours is probably 1 inch. The sweet spot for me, where I have my margin set, is 7/10 of an inch all the way around. So it's a little bit smaller. It gives me more space on the document, but it's not so crunched up that it's like overwhelming for the reader, right? So find that middle ground that works best for you. You don't have to use Times New Roman, but don't use wingdings or Comic Sans, right? So use a clear and common font, and find the right size between 10 and 12, depending on the font you're using. Think about who's reading this. Think about their eyes. And make a choice based on not only what looks good on the screen, but also if someone prints it out. TNR is Times New Roman. Good question. Yeah, that is like an unnecessary abbreviation on the screen. All right. Let's see if there's anything else here. References. Okay, this is the last slide. References shouldn't go on your resume or CV unless it is specifically asked for. It would be more common for these to be on a CV than a resume. But I've said so many times, your resume real estate is expensive and you don't want to waste it on stuff that actually belongs somewhere else. So my suggestion to you is to create a separate document and have it on the ready. It can be formatted just like your CV or resume, because usually when you're applying for opportunities, folks are going to give you 2 chances to indicate your references. They're either going to say, upload your list of references, which indicates it shouldn't belong on your resume or CV, or the application invites you to key in 3 to 5 different references. So on either of those occasions, you wouldn't include it on your resume or CV. Don't use language of references available upon request on your document, because you better believe I know that. If I ask you for references and you want this job, I know you're going to give them to me if I request it. It's just filler words, and you don't need those. If you have a separate document, use the same heading information as your resume so that people know those documents belong together. And do a little bit of investigation to offer courtesy to whoever's reading this list. Include the name, the current title, and location of your reference, contact information, and then offer a little bit of context about your relationship. So my reference page indicates folks who I work with currently and people who I've worked with in the past. And so with my past supervisors, I want to let an employer know this is a past supervisor. We worked together when I served as blah, blah, blah at whoever. That helps the reviewer know what kinds of questions they can ask them and who that person is to you. Most often we're just saying, oh, it's Nicole from, here's her resume, her email address. And that's not helpful, right? You can provide a little bit of extra information that will elevate what you've included in this reference document. All right, I think that is the last. Yeah, so now just questions. I've given you a lot of information. I'm going to make sure you have access to these slides, but are there any real-time, in the moment questions you have right now that I can answer for you?
I have a question. So, so many times when I'm applying for a job, I have my resume. I upload the resume into the application, and it takes apart my resume and puts it into categories. It's like it's reading it, and then it's part of the application process. Or then I get to the end and it's like review your resume, and it just looks like absolute like chaos. Do you know what I'm saying? I don't know what that's called. I don't know, but it's like it's so frustrating because I'm like, well, what are the employers going to see? Are they going to see this crazy, like chaotic thing that it has turned my resume into? Like, what is there a name for that?
Are
Do
you
you know what I'm
seeing,
talking about?
well, I'm wondering if it's a particular kind of, um, uh, for example, like if all the applications that you're doing are through government and it's the government system that's doing that.
Mhm.
I'm wondering if there's a common thread of industry or employer type that where that's happening, or if
Yeah.
it's just like the other way.
Yeah, and then it ends up where all your words are kind of like run together, and you're like, wow, that's not the formatting I had at all. And that's a bummer.
Yeah, I'm wondering if it is an applicant tracking system that's doing that.
Yeah.
Um, and there's a lot of, if you Google, for example, ATS or applicant tracking system, you can get a lot of information about just the idea of them and what purpose they serve to an employer. And you can see information about a lot of different specific ATS programs. And that might give you some tips about that. But um, not knowing a whole lot about the specific ATS that maybe
Yeah.
you're encountering, if that were happening to me, one thing that I might consider doing is figuring out who is this resume going to eventually, and
Mhm.
connecting with them and offering up the format that you meant it to be in. So like as a follow-up, if I were
Yeah.
to contact you, Robin, and just say, hi, I wanted to offer a copy of my resume or my CV. I've just applied for the position at your organization and I'm really interested and wanted to reiterate that interest to you and make sure you have the most updated copy of my document.
Yeah, that's a good way to word it instead of, by the way, your system sucks.
Yes.
I'm not trying to be a complainer here, but here's
Yes.
the actual resume.
Yeah, exactly. And you always want to just
Yeah.
rely on like, I am really interested. I'm not asking for something from you. I just want to give you this. Because usually we're feeling like a little bit panicked and anxious when we're doing this job search. And the
Yeah.
tendency is for us to say, like what's wrong? This was a problem. And when am I going to hear back from you? Yeah.
Yeah,
Resume parsing.
Avery, kind of. It's sort of like when it automatically takes your information and puts that into there and you can't really edit it. That's what I'm talking about.
Yeah. And
Anyway.
sometimes we like folks will, another version of this concern that you have is I had to upload my resume and then on the next screen I had to retype all of my experiences to fit them into this, like to the application box. Also really, really annoying. But if you think about that as an opportunity instead, uh, so if you have to submit your resume and then you have to type information into this box, you're really getting the chance to tell the story two different times. And so you wouldn't want to only just copy and paste what you'd already said. If there's some other like detail you wanted to offer, another way to talk about it, or just any kind of extra narrative or context that you can offer, use it as an opportunity. But Robin, I think that what would probably be really helpful and what would make you feel more confident is if you can find someone, so like an informational interview, but someone, a recruiter that you could talk to that's using a system like this and get their impression on like what do they see, what advice would they have, and there are probably people out there who would be super willing to tell you.
Thank you.
Yeah. Any other questions? All right, so I'm gonna make sure, yeah, thank you, Michelle. I'll make sure y'all have these slides. I have a resume and a CV guide also that pulls some of that information that I've shared you, but in a just a flip book, basically. I'll make sure y'all have all of those. You'll have access to my contact information if you need someone or you want someone to just take a look at your document specifically. I'm happy to do that. So I really appreciate your time. Thanks for letting me join your career day.
Yeah, thank you so much. It was been wonderful, very beneficial.
Good.
And we'll put all of the resources on our site and this video as well. So thank you,
Awesome.
Dr. Walters.
Yeah, thank y'all so much. Bye.